Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
Sarah, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Sarah Boone, a 46-year-old single mother, is now facing trial on charges of second-degree murder in connection with the death of her boyfriend, Jorge Torres.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
Fuck you.
Boone allegedly recorded the entire incident on her cell phone.
I can't fucking breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
A video that prosecutors describe as highly disturbing.
Sarah, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
According to Boone, the fatal events transpired after she and Torres engaged in a game of hide-and-seek, during which she reportedly zipped him into a suitcase, resulting in his suffocation.
He thought it would be funny to be put in the suitcase, so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna joke with you. But then I fell asleep.
Prosecutors, however, argue that this was not an innocent game gone wrong. They allege that Boone acted with a depraved mind and showed a reckless disregard for Torres's life.
I really love him, like I do, and I feel like I can help him.
Furthermore, they contend that Torres's death was part of an ongoing pattern of violence between the couple. Court records indicate that 5 years earlier, Torres had been arrested on 3 occasions for domestic battery against Boone. In a separate incident, Boone was previously arrested for allegedly strangling and assaulting Torres, although police could not determine the primary aggressor in that case. Despite Boone's initial statement to law enforcement asserting that Torres's death was accidental, her 9th defense attorney, Jim Owens, has indicated that Boone may pursue a self-defense argument as part of her defense strategy.
She was psychologically and physically abused by Mr. Torres.
How is your purported defense applicable legally?
Welcome to Trending Crime Story. This is the story of Sarah Boone, a suitcase murder which shocked the entire community. But before we dive deeper, we would love to extend our deepest condolences to the family and friends of Jorge Torres and everyone affected by the chilling loss. On the evening of February 25, 2020, a chilling 911 call shattered the quiet Winter Park. A 42-year-old woman, Sarah Boone, dialed the emergency number, her voice trembling as she uttered the words that would set off a chain of events no one could have predicted.
911, what is the location of your emergency?
4748 France Court, apartment 3.
4748, what's the street name?
France, F-R-A-N-T-Z.
And the apartment number?
3.
Is this a police or medical?
My boyfriend is dead.
The operator on the other end tried to maintain composure, but there was an undeniable tension in the room as the call was quickly relayed to dispatch.
Okay, send the line for the fire department. Do not hang up.
Fire risk. What's the location, Mercy?
That's 32.
No, please don't leave.
47.
The urgency in Sarah's voice hinted at something far more disturbing than a sudden death. There was a raw, underlying panic that suggested this was no ordinary tragedy. As the first responders raced to the scene, questions swirled in their minds, like what had happened in that house. When they finally arrived, the scene they encountered was far worse than they could have imagined. Sarah stood in the doorway, visibly shaken, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Inside, the lifeless body of Jorge Torres lay in a manner that was both perplexing and horrifying. The stories Sarah would tell them over the next few hours would be one of a shocking twist. The call was just the beginning of a case that would unravel into one of the most bizarre and disturbing mysteries Winter Park had ever seen.
I was awake, but I actually got out of the bed at like 12:30ish, whatever. So I came downstairs, and I was like, oh, he's in the suitcase still. And that's when I found him, and I took him out, and I tried doing CPR, and then I called him, and then I called you guys.
Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres started dating around the beginning of 2017, both having children from previous marriages. Sarah would describe herself as a straight-A student and above all an incredibly dedicated mother to her child. She also described herself as a person that only wanted to save Jorge. She said he had a lot of issues and that can be backed up by his extensive criminal record, but ultimately all she wanted was to make him a better person. Supposedly, Jorge also had quite a bad drinking problem, something that SARAH was trying to help him overcome. The relationship between SARAH Boone and Jorge Torres was at most times a complicated and toxic one marked by intense emotions that came between affection and conflict to the outside world. They appeared to be just like any other couple, trying to manage the challenges of life together, SARAH explained. They experienced so many moments of laughter and affection. It almost overruled the unhealthy parts of their relationship. This was a relationship that other people might mistake for love, but beneath the surface, there were dark undercurrents. SARAH, a woman who had her own struggles and insecurities, found something comforting in Hawkeye's presence. He was someone she could lean on, someone who understood her in ways she felt others didn't. Jorge, on the other hand, was determined to make their relationship work despite the difficulties they encountered. He cared about SARAH even as their confrontations became more regular and heated. However, as time passed, the disputes began to wear on both of them. Mistrust, irritation, and an increasing feeling of resentment overtook what used to be good aspects of their relationship. On the evening of February 24th, 2020, they had settled in for a quiet night at home, sharing a simple yet satisfying dinner together. A rare moment of peace between SARAH Boone and her boyfriend, Jorge Torres. The tensions that often plagued their relationship seemed for once to have melted away as they sat across the table from one another. There was a sense of normalcy for once in their normally chaotic relationship. After dinner, they opened a bottle of wine, letting the conversation flow as easily as the drink. They reminisced about better times, shared a few laughs, and even exchanged stories that brought smiles to their faces. It was the kind of evening that might have offered hope that their relationship was on the mend, and that perhaps they could even find a way to rekindle the spark they once had. The single bottle of wine they shared was enough to loosen their inhibitions, but not so much that they lost control. It seemed like the perfect end to a pleasant evening. As the night wore on, a playful mood took over. In a bid to keep the lighthearted atmosphere going, SARAH suggested they play a game. Something fun, something childish and innocent. Hide and seek. She proposed, recalling the simplicity of the game from their youth. George, perhaps amused by the suggestion and eager to keep the night's good spirits alive, agreed. What began as a playful diversion quickly turned into something far more sinister. The rules were simple, as they always were, with hide and seek. One person hides, the other seeks. SARAH suggested they add a twist to the game at some point during the game. SARAH coaxed George into hiding in a suitcase. An odd choice, but one that at the moment might have seemed like a harmless prank. Perhaps they both laughed at the absurdity of it. Or maybe George went along with it, trusting that SARAH wouldn't take things too far. But once inside, the atmosphere took a darker turn.
SARAH, I can't breathe, babe.
That's on you.
SARAH, I can't breathe.
It's on you.
Instead of opening the suitcase and letting him out, after a few moments of playful banter, SARAH decided to leave him inside and zipping it up tight. The game's playful nature faded as minutes turned into a terrifying ordeal. George, realizing he was trapped, likely began to panic, pleading with SARAH to let him out, but her response, if any, remains a disturbing mystery. What started as a game of hide and seek had transformed into a nightmare scenario, one in which George was helpless and at the mercy of someone he thought he could trust. Jorge Torres spent his final moments struggling for breath inside that suitcase, and by the time SARAH finally called 911 the next morning, the damage was done. SARAH Boone seemed like a woman overwhelmed with regret, her demeanor steeped in sorrow as she recounted the events of the night. She claimed that after their game of hide and seek, she had walked upstairs intending to continue their evening or perhaps check on something. But instead, she says she accidentally fell asleep.
Forgetting that he was in the
suitcase. You guys
suitcase.
were playing the hide and go seek.
Yes.
And at some point you put him in the suitcase?
No, he got in the suitcase. So he thought it would be funny to be put in the suitcase. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to joke with you and I'll zip you up and make him, squirm a little bit, whatever it is. But then I fell asleep.
The weight of the wine and the lateness of the hour pulling her into a deep, unplanned slumber. According to her, she had entirely forgotten that her boyfriend, Jorge Torres, was still in the suitcase downstairs, a detail that would prove fatal when she awoke the next morning, disoriented and groggy. The realization of what had happened hit her like a freight train in a panicked state. She rushed downstairs only to find George lifeless inside the suitcase, and that was when she made the 911 call. But as investigators delved deeper into the case, that facade of regret began to crack, revealing a darker and more disturbing truth lurking beneath her seemingly remorseful act. The more they examined the circumstances, the more inconsistencies they found in Sarah's story. For one, the idea that she could simply forget her boyfriend was trapped inside a suitcase seemed implausible, especially given the nature of the game and the apparent intensity of their relationship. And then there was the suitcase itself. How could anyone overlook such an obvious, distressing detail? As detectives pressed her for more information, their suspicions grew with Sarah's sleep truly accidental? Or had she deliberately left George inside the suitcase, knowing full well the danger she was putting him in? The more they questioned her, the more her regretful demeanor began to feel like an act, a carefully constructed facade meant to shield her from the true gravity of her actions. However, detectives discovered Torres's eye was damaged and he seemed to have a cut on his lip, and they ruled Torres' death a homicide. The following day, SARAH Boone was asked to come to the police station for an interview. During the interview, forensic investigators requested for her phone. She gladly handed it up and it was searched.
We were informed of some injuries that he has by the doctor. So he had a cut near his lip. We could see his mouth was a little
I haven't laid a hand on him.
However, they will soon learn the depth of what had happened. Fortunately, while checking Sarah's phone, investigators uncovered another horrific discovery. Sarah filmed her boyfriend's death in 2 separate recordings rather than me.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
For everything you've done to me.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
You.
Sarah.
Stupid.
Sarah.
That's my name. Don't wear it up.
Sarah. I can't breathe, babe. Seriously.
Yeah, that's when you do when you choke me.
This recording shows how George continuously pleads for Sarah to let him out of the suitcase. But we clearly hear Boone laughing and talking back at George. It tells us the mind of the perpetrator that she intentionally wanted her boyfriend to suffer for what he had done to her. The recording, however, which was filmed shortly before midnight on Sunday, lasts about 2 minutes. Also, the video shows the suitcase facing downward in the home's living room, which probably signifies that Torres, who was presumably trapped inside the suitcase, had panic surging through his veins as he realized the gravity of his situation in that suffocating darkness. He fought with every ounce of strength he had left, his body pressed tight against the suitcase. The air grew thinner with each passing second, and the walls of the suitcase closed in, stealing away the last remnants of hope. He was doing everything possible to push himself out of the luggage, his hands and feet kicking desperately against the sides. He tried to force the zipper open, hoping to locate a weak place in the material that would allow him to escape, but he couldn't find one. When Torres told her he was suffocating, she accused him of cheating on her, which was exactly how she felt suffocated when he did that to her, in an attempt to counter every claim. Sarah told authorities that she did not remember recording any of these videos, as a matter of fact. Some records showed Torres had been arrested multiple times for instances of domestic violence against Boone, and she, on the other hand, had been arrested once for an alleged instance of domestic violence against Torres. One of such incident occurred on July 25, 2018. That day, the couple went out to a bar to have some good times as lovers, but this took a different turn as what was meant to be a nice time out escalated into a fight. It all started when Sarah talked with some guy at the bar. This made Torres unnecessarily angry and jealous. He wanted to prove how in control he was over Sarah, that he dragged her upstairs, brutally assaulted her, and finally kicked her in the eye. But Sarah wasn't having any of that, so she resulted in strangling Torres. Luckily, that didn't lead to Torres's death, but both got arrested for this. Eventually, the charges against both of them were dropped, and each time Torres got into jail, SARAH would always bail him out. One would wonder if the couple loved each other this much. Why then do they ever fight? But that isn't a question to be answered anymore. As Torres ended his fight in a suitcase and then 6 feet beneath the ground, Jorge Torres, a 42-year-old man born in Philadelphia, was more than just another name in the headlines. He was a father, a man whose life was deeply intertwined with the lives of his children. He leaves behind a son and 2 daughters, each now forced to navigate a world forever altered by his absence, all because of an act of revenge. Nevertheless, going through these records, the Orange County Sheriff's deputy arrested and charged SARAH with second-degree murder for the murder of Torres without bail. Apparently, during the trial, she has written letters to the trial judge stating that she has not been represented fairly since February 2020. Multiple lawyers that were appointed to represent SARAH have chosen to withdraw as counsel, citing irreconcilable differences. One of the lawyers suggested Boone represent herself as no attorney can satisfy her, while another attorney said the relationship between them and SARAH had become adversarial. 8 of these different attorneys appointed to represent her have all withdrawn due to their indifference. As of 2024, SARAH is being represented by criminal defense attorney Patricia Cashman. Meanwhile, the beginning of the trial has been pushed back multiple times over the past 4 years due to the public defenders choosing not to work with SARAH. But after the withdrawal of her 8th lawyer, SARAH was deemed to have forfeited her right to get any more attorneys because of her difficulties with them, and must now represent herself in court and truthful with me.
Untruthful with me, and full-blown prejudice against me, which I believe adds to her nasty attitude towards me, and I do not trust her. So I have prepared this for you. It's a letter and then a continuation of the letter from the video visits that you are aware of, and everyone constantly blames me that I am the reason why I am supposedly on attorney number 8, which I am not the reason for any of them.
In any case, SARAH Boone has actually made history by being the first to be represented by 7 counsels in just a case, and still she walks away from the 8th attorney who sacrificed 20 hours of her time to talk with the defendant, SARAH Boone.
When I tried to update her with regard to the depositions that I took recently, she opted to exit the jail conference. When I tried to review some things with regard to discovery as to things I wanted to make sure she was aware of, she walked out.
In any case, SARAH Boone feels she is smarter than all of the lawyers that have been assigned to her. On the other hand, her 8th counsel, Patricia Cashman, is exhausted from having a defendant who is probably not satisfied with her services. SARAH is nevertheless expected to use the battered woman defense at her trial. On October 25, 2024, the next trial took place where SARAH Boone was found guilty of second-degree murder. During her trial, Boone said that violent incidents transpired between her and Torres in the past, and she acted in self-defense by keeping him in the suitcase. But Boone rejected a plea deal in which a judge would have sentenced her to 15 years in prison for manslaughter. A sentencing hearing is scheduled for December 2, 2024. A lot of people anticipate this trial as there have been so many questions about whether the victim, Jorge Torres, would get the justice he deserved. But do you think Boone is guilty of this crime? Was she a victim herself? And can she represent herself in court? Well, what we do know for sure is that something beautiful has been taken away from the lives of Torres, his children, and as they try to piece together their lives in the wake of this tragedy. George will always be with them, a father whose love will continue to guide them even from beyond the grave. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments section below.